welcome to this edition of Dustin's Kaleidoscope. I am Dustin, and today I have the pleasure of being here with Johanna Seppalainen, and she is an organizational development consultant and coach. First of all, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Dustin. It's a pleasure to be doing a show with you.
Oh, great. I wanted to start off with exactly what is an organizational development consultant?
That's an interesting question. So the reality is that there are lots of organizations.
Okay.
There are organizations such as corporations, companies, mom and pop stores, families. They are organizations as well. Your church, your sports environment. So there are many organizations. And organization development consultant helps those organizations overcome some issues and especially deal with planned change. So change happens all the time.
Okay.
But organizational development consultant deals with planned change.
So when you say planned change, do you mean specifically people? Do you mean the structure of the organization? Do you mean both of those things? More things?
It can be all of those.
Okay.
So it can be processes. So
Okay.
what happens in an organization? It can be the whole organization. It could be the individuals. So in a sense, there are three different types of interventions. How you deal with change is on organizational level, on team level, on individual level.
Okay, and you would be the person to attack each of those different areas?
That's correct.
Okay, so joining in on that, can you tell me a little bit about your background and like why organization?
Why me?
Yeah, well,
that's right.
I think you're the first organizational development coach or consultant and coach I've ever met. I've met coaches, but not organizational development. So tell me a little bit of like your background, why you decided on this area.
Certainly. So my background is, I'm an industrial organizational psychologist, and
Okay.
I concentrate on organizations. I find that to be a very satisfying part of organizational psychology, and I find it extremely interesting how we behave in work, because we tend to have different personas in different environments we are in, and people bring forward issues at work that are different from home, or in team environment there might be issues that come up, and then organization development consultant can come in and try to help.
Okay, so how does that, so you said that your background is in industrial psychology?
Industrial organizational psychology.
Industrial organizational psychology. And how is that different from organizational development? Or is there a different, or is it part of the overall umbrella of it? I'm just trying to get an understanding.
It's part of the overall umbrella. There isn't specific signification or training for organizational development.
Okay.
There might be courses for it, but there isn't particularly a degree that's awarded for organizational development. So it tends to be people who understand more human dynamics, so psychologists and such who get into it.
Okay, so for people who are looking at this, and we've used a lot of technical words, can you tell me in layman's terms how, like someone who is looking at this, they may not understand the technical terms?
Absolutely.
Why would somebody use your services, or why would somebody come to you? And who would come to you?
So, for example, companies who are dealing with virtual teams.
Oh, okay.
Workplaces today have changed considerably from the 70s, 80s. So a lot of people outsource, and then sometimes there might be issues between how to work with those teams. So then an organizational development consultant can come in and help with setting up procedures, setting up team building issues that help alleviate those problems or challenges.
So the first thing that I thought of when you said the virtual the virtual teams is I can remember like in like the early 2000s or maybe the mid 2000s when that was really big, where people had the flexibility of working from home and also working with teams from not just within the US but throughout the entire world.
Correct.
So what kind of problems or issues would present themselves, and what would you be able to help an organization with?
Okay. One of the most common problems in organizations would be communication issues.
Okay.
And especially when the team is virtual, there are you might be dealing with people from different cultures, and there might be cultural issues that come in. So helping people communicate. This is also a very common human problem when you think about it, communication.
Yeah.
So it's very natural that it also exhibits itself in the workplace.
Okay. So that's a great example, because I'm thinking if you have someone, I'm just thinking of a personal, from personal experience where I had to work with a virtual team living in California, but also working with a team from Asia, and there was a communication problem.
Yes.
So you coming in, do you have to understand the cultures of both, of all of the members, or of both team areas, or how do you get up to speed? Like, I mean, can you possibly know every single culture that, maybe a virtual team?
That's right. So one of the necessary qualities of an organizational development consultant is to be open to listen and to investigate. Okay. So we don't come into an organization saying, we know everything. We don't. So we work with you, trying to understand what's going on with your company or your organization, what's going on with the virtual team, understand those elements, and then work together to realize what might solve that.
Okay.
So it's not by me coming in and giving you a neat little package that it's all fixed. No, it's discovering it together. So there's a lot of diagnostic work.
Okay.
And a lot of the diagnostic work is talking to people. There are many different ways of collecting diagnostic work.
And what are some of the examples?
For example, surveys, focus groups, one-on-one interviews. It depends what's most time efficient, cost efficient.
So when you come into these organizations, it sounds like you do a lot of assessing up front, and learn, and you also listen to see what
Correct.
the issues or problems may be. Now, when you get to the point where you actually want to, when you've created a strategy, do you actually implement the strategy, or do you hand it back to the organization and give your recommendations? How does that work?
I think it happens both ways.
Okay.
So help in implementing, but also the organization has the bigger know-how what it is that they are doing exactly. So it depends.
Okay.
And it's working hand in hand, potentially inviting other professionals come in.
Oh, okay.
So yes.
And what other types of professionals would you, I mean, just in general, I know I'm sure each engagement is probably specific to that engagement, but typically what other professionals would you ask to come in?
So for example, there could be a process need in implementing new software, for example, and then bring in a training company who deals specifically with that. Okay,
that's very interesting. We've talked a lot about the companies, but you also do coaching, and I'm assuming
Correct.
that's for individuals.
Yes, that's for individuals, exactly. And that's also very much development work as well. And this is where I find it very helpful to have a background such as mine to help people along. So I do executive coaching, so helping executives find efficiencies in their work. And I do career coaching, where there's a more direct goal But there are specific steps, and it's very helpful to have someone support you through those steps.
Okay, so for executive coaching, I'm trying to get an idea of the level. Are these the C-level executives? Are they VPs, directors, or all of the above?
It's all of the above.
Okay.
All of the above. I've coached people, sort of kind of fresh managers into leadership roles. I'm teaching of CEO level, so it depends.
So how does it work? So let's say I am the CEO of a dough company, and I approach you. I don't really know. I know that there's a value in what you have, but I don't really know what I need to do in order to get to my goals. Whether it's to increase the number of contacts. I don't know, networking. How would you help me figure out what I need to do? Or
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. So some ideas is to use assessments, so psychological assessments, and this is an area to kind of discover where there might be development needs, where there might be where it might be lacking, some of the directions that are helpful. And also talking. So talking is part of the diagnostic work, but assessments cut down a lot in the diagnostic work just because you're able to discover so much more.
Okay.
Quickly versus
that sounds great, because for someone who knows that, especially C-level people or people who are executives, they may feel like, what do I need to do next? And they may need it sounds like they may need an outside person to come and evaluate and assess the situation.
And bring some clarity into it.
Exactly. We have about a minute left. So after the break, I'm going to ask you about the career coaching from an individual standpoint. That way you can give us a little bit of background about that.
Sounds wonderful.
Okay, so at this point, we are going to go away for a little while. You're here with Dustin of Dustin's Kaleidoscope, and we are here with Johanna, and we'll be right back.
Local government, local educational institutions, and local community members all use cable access TV to communicate their message. They depend upon it as an affordable means of outreach. Public educational and government access television empowers local government agencies, individuals, and groups to use the media to speak directly to their constituents in a more direct and cost-effective way. Make sure everyone has a voice. Support your local PEG channels.
And welcome back to Dustin's Kaleidoscope. I'm Dustin, and I am here with Johanna. Thanks again for being here.
Oh, thank you so much.
Before the break, we were just about to talk about career coaching. You talked about the executive coaching, but now the career coaching, which is, explain what that is. I'll let you explain.
Absolutely. So at times, people are very clear in what they are looking for. Sometimes they are not so clear. So in situations where people are not so clear, I help them clarify and focus what it is. People who are clear and are not getting quite where they want to go, I'm giving them nice steps to move on to what they need to. How do they get to? So we start with, for example, identifying the companies they want to work for. Okay. And then start thinking about contacts and so on, and how to approach those contacts. It could be reviewing resume, looking at what kind of qualities and competencies people have. Do they want to do what they were doing before?
So these are people who would approach you and they would say, hey, I like what I'm doing, but I feel like I could be challenged more, but I don't know how. You would be able to come in and do the assessment that you spoke about a little earlier, and then help them determine a path in which to get to their goal, basically?
Correct.
Okay.
I will definitely, yes, help people to define their goal. But this is also people who might have stepped out of the workforce for a little while and figuring how to get back in.
Okay.
And giving ideas in how to make oneself qualified for the workplace today.
Now that's a good one, because I know due to the the recent, and by recent I mean the last few years, where people have been laid off.
Years, yes.
Yeah. How do you approach someone who? I would imagine that someone who hasn't been employed for a while may be, feel dejected, may feel like they're unemployable. How do you go about helping them in that regard?
That's right. So first, it's very important to lift someone's spirit.
Okay.
So it's very important to move past those feelings of feeling rejected and not employable, and start feeling very competent in what one does, and start building those little wins. And this is very similar to organizational development as well. It's like start with little wins to get the excitement, and people want to move forward.
Okay. So for example, give me an example of someone, or just, it doesn't even have to be a true example, or just like walk me through the steps for someone who may have been unemployed or out of the workforce for whatever reason. Mm-hmm. How do you go about that? I'm assuming that your psychology background also helps with the whole helping them feel better about about him or herself.
Absolutely, absolutely. So talking about successes in earlier career, taking elements from the earlier career that one wants to keep, and figuring out how they fit into the future and what needs to be done to reach that future state. I oftentimes see people after extended breaks are looking to do career changes.
Okay.
And are looking for some other things from their careers. And so together working to identify those.
Okay.
It's interesting. Careers give us a very strong identity. And in case of someone losing their job, being laid off, it's sort of like losing a part of their identity. And it's very hard to imagine oneself like, well, I used to be a master baker, for example, and now who am I? How do I introduce myself? So that has a lot to do with identity.
So so we've spoken at length about people who have lost their jobs or who have been out of the workforce for some period of time. What about people who are just getting out of college and they have not even had the opportunity to get into the workforce? And then for people who have had to retire early, or maybe they weren't even retiring early, but they just feel like, wow, I've been unemployed or I've retired and now I really want to get back into the workforce. How would you deal with both of those situations? Like, is it still the same process of assessing and?
Yes, it is, and it's building competencies that are attractive to today's employer.
Okay.
And it might be about finding volunteer roles or pro bono roles in building those competencies. What's also interesting about competencies, when employees are evaluated, it's based on competencies. And competencies are the knowledge, skills, and abilities what one brings into the job. And in many of the psychological assessments or psychometric tools measure those competencies.
Okay. And then these are the things that these are things that are part of your assessment?
Correct.
And they would be consistent with finding out what an employer would look for. So the young grad who has never worked before, but it's been a year and a half, and she's still looking for a position, she would use that assessment and then try to match it up. And the same for the person who's retired who wants to get back into the workforce?
Possibly. I think they get tailored as well because, for example, I'm doing some pre-employment assessment that's very tailored and specific for the job that people are applying for. So people are assessed on qualities that are needed on those jobs. So for example, in the assessment is virtual. So these are people that can be anywhere in the U.S. It's happening via phone and over the internet.
So that's how you would consult with
How do I assess these people? Yes.
So you use technology like
absolutely.
Skype and
we actually don't introduce the visual because that can also introduce bias, prejudice.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
So in a sense, it's safer to do it over the phone when you have no real way of being biased. Of course, there are ways of being biased in that as well, but it's in this particular assessment I'm talking about. We measure qualities that are needed in that job. So people are put through role plays. Okay. So me as a psychologist, I play various roles for each candidate where we're looking for how they are responding to things and then evaluating them based on that.
Okay. So I'm thinking about the person who comes to you and says, you know what, I have it in my mind. I want to make a career change, and I'm currently a financial analyst at this company, but you know what, I really would like to be a tech writer. So do you then assess the person and see how well their true skills match up with what they would like to do, or do you do the assessment and say, like, that's not quite where your strengths lie? I mean, how do you diplomat? I mean, if that happens, how do you diplomatically do that, or do you just allow the person to do whatever they want?
Yes, that's an interesting question. So, in a situation like that, I would really have deep conversations with the client to understand that is this truly where the strengths are?
Okay.
I'm never going to say that I'm qualified in evaluating someone's technical writing and saying, like, yes, this is good, this is not good. It's more about the conviction. What are they willing to do for it?
Okay. So you could have someone who maybe where writing is not a strength, and you can see assessment-wise that it's also not a strength.
That's right.
Maybe if they have the conviction to go back to school or do whatever it takes to do that, then you could help them with that path.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. It's working with people's passions.
How about the case where this is what the person may want to do, but you can see clearly where this person would be a slam dunk in another another career. Not so much that you're going to say, like, no, you can't do it, but would you also offer that up and say, like, look,
absolutely,
okay,
in a more diplomatic way. Yes. Absolutely. Yes.
Okay. We have talked about the person who comes to you and says, hey, I would like help in this. How about going into organizations where you are brought in as a professional to help maybe a group of people? How do you approach that? Because maybe they don't want your help. Maybe they don't think they need your help.
That's right. Yes. So for short, I'm going to call organization development OD.
Okay.
OD consultant. It's very important that people are open for it. You cannot force someone into it. Same with coaching. You can always say, my friend needs coaching. It's useless if your friend is not willing to accept coaching.
Well, have you ever been in the position like where maybe the company suggests that everyone go through coaching of some sort just to find out whether or not their skills are in alignment?
I haven't, but I've had someone call me and it's like, oh, my husband wants coaching, so yes, it's like, does he want it or do you want it?
That's an awkward position. I mean,
it is a little bit awkward, so needing to make sure that he's on the board with it.
Right. Are there any other things that that I've missed in asking you about organizational development?
Organization development is very large area, very, very large area, and as we talked about in the beginning, organizations can be lots of different things.
Okay.
It can be a family unit. It could be, your sports unit or church, or it could be an organization.
Okay.
So there are very many different levels, and challenges or dysfunctions happen. And sometimes it's very helpful to bring someone else in outside and help you work through it.
Okay.
Similar to coaching.
Okay, that sounds great. Just before we go, I want to make sure that people can find out where to contact you. Can you
Great.
give us your
Yes. So you
website?
can find me on my website, www.doulosconsulting.com.
Okay,
And looking forward to hearing from anyone who's interested.
great. We have about a minute left. Thank you so much for joining us today. That was really good information. I like that you were able to tell us at many different levels, whether you're an executive or whether or not you're a first-time person coming into the workforce, how you would be able to help people. So thank you so much for being here.
Well, Dustin, thank you so much for inviting me.
And we'd love to have you come back again just to see what happens when the economy changes, to see if there is any difference
That's
in how you need
right.
to coach.
Yes.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
You have been watching Dustin's Kaleidoscope. I am Dustin, and we will see you next time.